Ahoy, mateys! Welcome to Podcasts of the Caribbean, a podcast covering the world of Pirates of the Caribbean, from the theme parks to the movies and everything in between. My name is Justin Helmer, and I will be your host on this voyage through the Caribbean. It'd be too late to alter course now, mateys. Hello and welcome back to Podcasts of the Caribbean. This is episode 41, and today we're covering the 9th book in the Young Jack Sparrow series, which is titled Dance of the Hours. And if you remember what happened in the last episode, in the last book, Jack Sparrow and Fitzwilliam discovered that Fitzy's pocket watch happened to be enchanted, and it actually has the power to stop time itself, which is pretty crazy, pretty powerful. But unfortunately, the watch also begins to unravel time after it is used repeatedly. So Jack and Fitzy are now stuck on Isla Escalatico once again, and now because of the watch, there's now pterodactyls flying around overhead, and Stone-Eyed Sam is alive once again, and he also has the Sword of Cortez. And included in all of this is the fact that Davy Jones also wants the pocket watch, and he is waiting just offshore for Jack and Fitzy. So the two of them find themselves in the middle of a pretty big problem. So that brings us to where the book begins. But before we dive into the book, let's cover some Pirates news.
I hear a rumor.
You may have also heard whisperings and rumors.
A message from someone you know.
I always listened like a thief for news of the Black Pearl.
Okay, so I will preface this and say that the validity of this is not completely confirmed, but it is the first significant development on a new Pirates of the Caribbean movie that we have seen in a very long time. It's been years now where the only news we've been getting is just the same response from Jerry Bruckheimer over and over again about whether or not Johnny Depp is coming back, or if the next movie is a reboot or not. I feel like we've been in this infinitely repeating cycle of the same exact thing. So like I said, we haven't really gotten any updates past that in a while. So that's why I wanted to cover this, whether or not it is true. So, a few days before I am recording this episode, there was an article from the website World of Real saying that an untitled Pirates of the Caribbean movie will begin shooting in late 2025. And the even more interesting part of this is that apparently production will take place in St. Vincent. Yes, you heard that right, St. Vincent. So if you don't remember, that is where they filmed the Port Royal sequences in the first 3 Pirates movies. So what I and other fans are theorizing is that we'll be returning to Port Royal. And the set that they used for Port Royal is still standing in St. Vincent to this day. So obviously, take this news with a grain of salt, as we don't know if this is completely true. But if it is, that means we'll hopefully be seeing more significant Pirates news in the near future with filming on the horizon. And another thing to note here is that Johnny Depp is not expected to return. But once again, take this all with a grain of salt. I figured I'd let you all know on the off chance this ends up being true. Because it's been the only update we've had in like years. So if it's true, awesome. If it's not, oh well. Just figured I'd cover it just in case. But anyway, let's get back to the main contents of this episode, which is Book 9, Dance of the Hours. So the book begins with Jack and Fitzy making their way through the jungle, and Jack at this point is fed up with the Caribbean heat, and he mentions wanting to go to like the Northwest Passage and visit Russia or Lapland on his next adventure, somewhere cold and not obsessively hot all the time. And as they're walking through the jungle, we realize that time is currently stopped thanks to the pocket watch, and Jack and Fitzy are able to move around the island freely without being in danger of anything. But they are making their way to a port in the distance that is filled with ships from all over the world and also every age. So once they get close, they head into a nearby cave and they decide to start time again by pressing down the crown of the watch. And once they do so, sound comes rushing back and along with movement. But they notice that something strange is now going on. So in the book, it says, "A dark shadow appeared on the ocean, like a pool of spilled ink. Above it, the sky grew black and stars shone through. The blackness above and shadow below spread rapidly, a cold wind before them. Soon, exactly half the earth and sky were bathed in night. To the east, stars twinkled and a bright harvest moon hung in the sky. But to the west was a cloudless Caribbean day, with the sun shining brightly on everything below." So while Jack and Fitzy are trying to figure out why it has gotten dark on one half and normal on the other half, they start to hear rumbles behind them. And when they turn around, they see none other than Captain Torrents standing there with storm clouds gathering over his head. So finally, we get to see the return of Captain Torrents, who we haven't seen since the first book in the series, The Coming Storm. But it is great to see him back. And of course, this is Isla Escalatica that we are on right now, and that is where he was marooned at the end of The Coming Storm. So it was only a matter of time before we ran into him. But we're going to see that Torrents has used his solitary time on the island to good use. So let's go into the book and see what happens. So it says, Jack snapped his fingers. Of course, I knew we were forgetting something, he noted, ticking off his fingers. Dangers of Isla Escalatica are as follows. Stone-Eyed Sam? Check. His booby-trapped temple? Check. Jungles, heat, vicious insects and animals? Check. Captain Torrents, who can summon the power of storms when he's angry, and whom we stranded on said island last time we were here? Check. Glad we're all here now. I've been waiting myself many a month to find and gut you, the pirate growled. There's a bit of a waiting list for that, Jack pointed out. Shut your fool mouth, doomed little man. I'll take my revenge now, Torrents bellowed, reaching for his sword. Fitzwilliam already had his rapier drawn and stood at the ready. I knew it, Jack sighed. Pirates have no manners or sense of decency, always looting and pillaging, attacking defenseless ships, cutting lines. With a blood-curdling scream, Torrents leaped at him. Jack drew his own cutlass. It was rusty and old, except for the tip, which was bright, shiny gold. The pirate captain paused for a moment, surprised by the weird-looking sword. Long story, mate, Jack said. Then he lunged. With ugly but accurate skill, Torrents easily deflected the blow. Fitzwilliam brought his sword quickly up and down, splitting the air with a whistle, but its aim to distract Torrents failed completely. The pirate ignored the harmless attack and slashed at Jack. Oi there, Jack said, leaping out of the way. Metal clashed on the rocky cave wall behind him, begetting sparks. Sparks also glowed in Torrents' eyes, previewing the lightning that always came with his anger. Speaking of which, where was the lightning? And why was there no indication of a raging storm outside the cave? When Jack's crew stranded him on the island, Torrents was surrounded by a hurricane that was stirred up by the pirate's anger. Hey, Fitzy, Jack called out, swishing his sword in Torrents' general direction. The pirate batted at his side. Notice anything different since the last time we were here? Jack asked. Besides the pterosaurs, the day becoming night, but only half of it doing so, and dead pirate kings rising from their graves? Fitzwilliam asked, breathing heavily as he struck out at Torrents' eyes with his right arm. Yes, besides all that, Jack said, waving his hand with dismissive impatience. Without looking, Torrents parried Fitzwilliam and immediately brought his cutlass back up to Jack's belly. Jack dropped and rolled. I mean with Captain Tornpants here. Usually when he's hopping mad, there's a storm the size of the Outer Hebrides glowing around his head. You are right, Fitzwilliam said, suddenly realizing that they were all dry, no rain or hail, or even clouds emanating from the cursed sailor, and he is really quite mad right now. Captain Torrents laughed evilly, his big, dirty teeth snapping. I've put my time on this island to good use. Being stranded here made me angry. Very angry. Very, very angry. With each very, he brought his sword down, first at Fitzwilliam, then at Jack, then Fitzwilliam again. The boys had to duck to keep their heads. I don't think this place has ever seen such rain. Good for the crops, then, and the soil, too, Jack said, ducking down low and trying to bring his cutlass up to Torrents' thigh. But the pirate just kicked him aside, his boot making a horrible cracking noise against Jack's ribs. You all right? Fitzwilliam called out. Oh, aye, Jack wheezed, trying to catch his breath. The pirate went on, ignoring the conversation. I realized after a time that I could control the curse laid upon me by Davy Jones, harness the energy of storms and bend the elements to my will, if I could control the anger. Congratulations, mate, that's lovely, Jack said, picking himself up and raising his sword to protect himself while he recovered. More pirates should learn about anger management. Laugh at this, why don't you? Torrents said, grinning. He sheathed his sword and opened up his hands and stared at his palms. His big, bushy eyebrows knitted together in concentration, and his eyes flashed. Bolts of lightning began to leap from his fingertips, directly at Jack. Eep! Jack cried, and he daintily hopped out of the way. Smoke rose up from the cave wall behind him. Torrents quickly turned and blew over his hand at Fitzwilliam like he was puffing away dust. A tiny storm appeared, complete with thunderheads and hail. It flew at Fitzwilliam, blinding him. Then Torrents turned to the sea and pulled both of his hands into fists. On cue, 2 giant waterspouts rose up from the waves. As Torrents pulled his hands toward his chest, the spouts bent and raced up the hillside toward the cave, destroying everything in their path. "I would be worried," Jack said as calmly as he could in the face of doom, "if we didn't have a little supernatural what-have-you of our own." With a triumphant sneer, Jack whipped out the watch. Very dramatically, he pulled the crown to stop time. But nothing happened. Jack tried again. And again, nothing. He shook the watch, then noticed its face. The minute and hour hands were going crazy, spiraling in different directions around and around the face. "What now, Jack?" Fitzwilliam asked. "Well, Fitzy, me mate, I think it's time for good old Plan B," Jack said, delicately closing the watch and pocketing it. "We run," Fitzwilliam sighed tiredly. "We run," Jack agreed. Both turned to go. But Torrents threw open his fists, and the waterspouts he had summoned grew huge, blocking the entrance of the cave. Jack and Fitzwilliam could see down to the belly of the vortexes, swirling gray doom. "Goodbye, lads," Torrents laughed, pulling the waterspout's hand over hand like he was hauling up a water bucket. "I've got just the right island retreat for you to spend the rest of your days." "Aw, who am I kidding? You only have minutes left to live. Anchors away!" The 2 waterspouts opened up and sucked in Fitzwilliam and Jack. Around them, water and twigs and stones and the occasional surprised small animal whirled viciously. The boys watched the blurry world disappear below them as they were carried high into the air. They passed over the hypnotized sailor warriors and through a flock of pterosaurs that fell screaming out of the way. They passed from the sunny side of the island to the dark and up into the mountains. A sulphurous-smelling cloud rose up. "Blast it, Fitzwilliam, can you not control your bowels like a man when the going gets rough?" Jack demanded. "I told you before, I will tell you again. It is not me," Fitzwilliam called back from inside his own waterspout. He sounded less angry than nervous. And for good reason. Below them rose up the angry, jagged cone of the goddess Chantico's volcano. The waterspouts dipped. It was obvious where they were going to drop the 2 boys. A mighty rumbling, far greater than Torrents' small storms, issued up from the volcano. The ground below them began to shake. Spurts of acrid black smoke issued forth like an angry tea kettle. Red gold lava began to bubble out through the volcano's cracks. The waterspouts dipped more, and Jack and Fitzwilliam were spat out on a narrow lip of the volcano, just below the top. They were too bruised and banged up from the ride to move much, but it didn't matter. The sheer height of the walls above and below them meant escape would be impossible. The volcano shuddered and rumbled again. The 2 boys stumbled, desperate not to fall off. An explosion of lava shot into the air. Escaping a volcanic eruption once, maybe. Doing it twice? "Methinks we're dead dog meat, mate," Jack said sadly. So, Torrents has essentially gotten himself an upgrade, as he is now able to channel the cursed powers in new ways. So he can now shoot lightning out of his hands, like Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars, and he can also make water cyclones, like the ones that carried Jack and Fitzy back to the volcano. Which, speaking of, is where the 2 of them are stuck once again. And this time, it doesn't look too good. The lava begins to rise around them, and the shearing heat and flames begin to get close. But this can't be the end for the 2 of them, right? Well, let's find out. So in the book it says, their banter was cut short by the wall of heat that hit them. It came from below, blasting their whole bodies. It burned from their faces to their sweaty toes. "Goodbye, Jack Sparrow. It has been most interesting," Fitzwilliam yelled out. "That's Captain Jack Sparrow," Jack yelled back. Flames began to lick at their fingers, little tickles of feathery heat. The soles of their shoes and boots began to slip into the ground as the rock itself melted. Jack prepared himself for the searing, burning pain, but it actually felt pretty good. He had been in a Navajo sweat lodge once, long story, mate, and it felt a lot like this. Beads of perspiration broke out on his brow, but it felt cleansing, not deadly, and the waves of heat were doing wonders for his back. All those hours of standing up and steering the ship melting away like magic. Jack cracked open an eye. Yes, they were at the edge of a fiery, doomy pit. Yes, they were standing on a small rocky archipelago above a sea of red-hot lava. Yes, there was magma and sparks and embers and ash swirling through the air in an apocalyptic maelstrom. But not a hair on his head had been singed, and there was no smell of burning flesh, only that awful sulfur stink. He looked over at Fitzwilliam. The nobleman's son was poised heroically, chest out, jaw set, standing firm, prepared to die, but still very much alive. "Too bad," Jack grumbled. Then he cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, "Open your eyes, mate! You're not dead!" Fitzwilliam did as he was told, blinking into the bright light. Sheets of flame rose up and passed over them, without leaving a mark. Just that feeling of healing warmth. Fitzwilliam passed his hand to a flame in wonder. The fire started changing colors, as if it were getting hotter. Tips of yellow and orange flames began to glow white and then blue, burning at temperatures the two boys could only imagine, since they didn't actually feel any hotter. The flames danced faster and closer together. Then they merged into one thick blazing column. The inferno shifted and changed shape. Hands and arms separated out of the brightness, and then a head formed out of the heat. A woman made of pure white fire stepped forward. Fitzwilliam and Jack watched, dumbstruck. The flames died down and her features became clearer. High cheekbones and a sharp nose. Ash and ringlets of smoke swept back over her ears like hair. Her eyes were flame blue with no pupils. Her face was perfectly smooth, with lips that looked like they were carved from stone. "I am Chantico, goddess of the volcano and protector of this island." Her voice sounded like it came from everywhere at once. It completely lacked expression or emotion. Pretty cold demeanor for a goddess of fire, Jack couldn't help observing out loud. "That is how you address a goddess?" Fitzwilliam whispered angrily. "Pardon if I am not familiar with the etiquette," Jack answered back, shrugging. "This is the first goddess I've met." "You are the ones who have meddled with the proper flow of time," she accused them. Her fine eyebrows gathered slightly. "The hours are dancing again, and it is your fault." Jack gulped. Chantico might have appeared cold, but it was obvious she was capable of annoyance, maybe even rage, something he did not want to personally witness. He tried to stealthily reach into his pocket and tuck the watch further in. After all, she didn't have any proof that they were the ones responsible. "Ouch!" he yelped. The watch had turned white hot in his hand. He instinctually dropped it and stuck his fingers in his mouth. "No!" Fitzwilliam cried as the watch started to bounce over the lip, into the volcano itself. But one of the tongues of white flame caught it and held it in the air. "Another tool of man," Chantico said with disgust, looking at the watch, "interfering with the ways of nature." "Aye, bad men and their watches, foul beasts," Jack agreed, still sucking on his burned fingers. "You should see our compasses and harpsichords, pure devilry." "This island has seen many lives," the goddess sighed, ignoring him. She turned from the watch and looked out beyond the volcano. "Many histories. Many people have come and gone. They breed and build their edifices upon the land, which are eventually washed away into the sea, as all things are with time." "What's an edifice?" Jack whispered to Fitzwilliam. "A building, you idiot," Fitzwilliam shot back. It was a far more disappointing definition than Jack had hoped. "With his buildings and his toys, man always tries to stop the natural order of things. I had thought we would be free from it for a time. The mad king with his ridiculous little sword who ruled a city that should never have been." Chantico shook her head. He was finally stripped of power, and the natural order returned. "Ridiculous little sword," Fitzwilliam whispered. "She cannot mean the sword of Cortez." Jack grinned proudly and spoke up, thinking about the magical, powerful sword. "We were there, in the time of the Mad King. Awful mess. Of course, we were there after, too, when he was dead, which was actually the first time he came to this island, before he was alive. Again, if you catch my meaning." Chantico raised one fiery brow at him. She could have been angry or amused. There was no way to tell. "Behold your dangerous toy," she said, indicating the watch with one long, flamy finger. Jack and Fitzwilliam turned to look. The watch's hands had stopped spinning. The two boys looked up at the sky eagerly, but even through the ash and flame they could see it was still split in two, night and day. And as if just to prove the point, another flock of pterosaurs screamed overhead. Nothing was back to normal. "Look again," Chantico ordered. The two boys looked back at the watch. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the minute and hour hands drew back until they were both lined up at 12 on its face. "You have 12 hours to repair the damage you have done," said the goddess. Tendrils of blue flame rose from her hair and fingers. She was about to be absorbed back into the flames that surrounded her. "If the island has not returned to its natural course when the clock again reads 12, I will destroy you and find one who can stop the dancing of the hours." Her eyes burned, literally. She fixed them on Jack. "Oh, well, thank you, your goddessness," Jack said sarcastically, bowing. "We're so grateful to be given this chance to fix things before you destroy us and find someone better. Do you know what that sort of talk does to a lad's self-esteem? You automatically assume there's a chance we're going to muck it up and are already lining up some sort of better adventurer who can." Chantico opened her mouth wide, so wide it was as though her head had split open. They could see past her tongue, all the way down her throat. Jack cleared his own throat, nervous that he might have actually overdone it this time. Chantico let out a mighty roar. It sounded like it came from the depths of the volcano itself. With it came a hot wind and swirls of ashes that surrounded the two boys. Jack screamed. The soot pouring out of Chantico's mouth burned his eyes, and the sparks singed his face. Fitzwilliam swore profusely, using words Jack had never heard him use before. Finally, the wind died down and the flames petered out around their feet. The ashes settled into little black piles. Fitzwilliam's pocket watch rocked on its perch of thin air. Then it fell, landing on one of the piles of ash. The boys were no longer on the lip of the volcano, but on its north side, looking down at the port with the ships from ages gone by. Jack picked up the watch. He blew on it, raising a little cloud of soot. He used his shirt sleeve to polish the dial, and saw that the hands had started moving normally again. He groaned. They had already lost a minute. So let's recap all that real quick. So we just got to meet Chantico, who is actually one of the heathen gods, and specifically goddess of the volcano. And she is also the protector of Isla Esqueletica, and now has tasked Jack and Fitzwilliam with fixing time. And they only have 12 hours to do this. So now we know of two heathen gods in the Pirates of the Caribbean universe, which of course are Calypso and now Chantico. So Jack and Fitzwilliam are now trying to figure out how to fix time, as that is a pretty vague thing to do. And the port they were originally heading to is still in the distance, but Jack deduces it would take around 6 hours to get there from their current location. And they are currently up on the north side of the volcano, so they need to find a way down. And Fitzy goes close to the edge to take a closer look, and Jack suppresses the urge to kick Fitzy off and send him down the cliff. But out of nowhere, a pterodactyl swoops in, and Jack is able to kill it before it reaches Fitzy. And Jack tells Fitzy that the pterosaur is about to carry him away. And after he says this, Jack gets an idea. So he starts to wave his arms and jump around, trying to get the attention of the pterodactyls that are swirling up above. And Jack specifically is trying to lure in a bigger pterodactyl, and one that is big enough to carry him down to the port in the distance. And once Fitzy realizes what Jack's plan is, he's honestly actually kind of impressed, and joins Jack in waving the pterosaurs over. And he pulls out his shiny sword and waves it in the air. And he tells Jack that his father was a bit of a birder, and told him that birds of prey love shiny objects. So when one of the pterodactyls comes close, Jack jumps up and grabs the claws of the beast, and then Fitzy then jumps after him and grabs onto Jack's ankles. But the weight of two people is way too much for this pterodactyl, so it crashes back onto the ledge. And then Fitzy then says they will need to attract two pterodactyls, one for each of them. And not long after this, two more pterosaurs come swooping in at Jack and Fitzy. So the two of them grab hold of the claws of their respective pterosaurs, but Jack realizes that the reason these two were flying close together was because they were fighting. And during this pterodactyl fight, Fitzy's beast bites down on the wing of Jack's and rips flesh off of that pterodactyl. And this, of course, ends up sending Jack and his pterodactyl plummeting back down to Earth. So Fitzy is then able to pull himself onto the back of his pterodactyl and begins to ride it like a horse. And after a few moments, he's able to control the beast, and he pulls on its wings, ordering it to dive. And then just before Jack hits the ground, he lands on the back of Fitzy's pterodactyl. And Fitzy then flies the pterodactyl over to a nearby field that is close to the port. And they touch down, and immediately after this, they notice some very big cats with large fangs approaching them. And from the description in the book, it seems like these creatures are saber-toothed tigers. But let's go back into the book and see what happens. So in the book, it says, "It was a scene straight out of Jack's worst nightmare. No, wait, Jack thought carefully. His worst nightmare was a lot more deadly than this. and it involved a certain pirate lord from Singapore and a certain tentacled captain. This, however, was still rather scary. A whole pack of oversized Constances surrounded them. They had long matted fur and ridiculously huge claws, yellowed and sharp and several inches long. But it was their teeth that really did it. Huge, long ivory tusks like an elephant's, but razor sharp. They advanced, circling the two boys and the pterosaur. Some roared and others howled, their teeth flashing in the sunlight. "Nice kitty," Jack said weakly. The cat closest to him growled in response. "They are hunting as a pack," Fitzwilliam said, voice trembling with fear. "Thank you for that interesting scientific fact," Jack said sarcastically. The cats paced to and fro, tightening the circle with every step. The pterosaur shifted nervously on its back feet. It placed its talons on the ground to steady itself, hoisting its wings up over its back. Then the lead cat sprang. "Here we go," Jack cried, drawing his cutlass. Jack slashed, and the cat yowled and ripped the air with its giant paws, then fell heavily to the ground. It stuck out its neck and roared at Fitzwilliam, trying to bite him. Two more cat things were already launching themselves at Jack. On the other side, one had begun to swipe at the pterosaur. The pterosaur screamed a horrible reptilian call and struck at the cat with its sharp beak. "Guess he can take care of himself then," Jack reasoned. "Or herself. Mustn't be chauvinistic about these things. Take help wherever one can get it." Two more cats drew close. Jack leaped into the air, flipping forward over their backs and landing on a tree stump behind them. "Over here, boys," he said, waving. The cats screamed in confusion. They spun around to face him and cracked their skulls against each other. Roaring in anger, the one on the left took its claw and raked the other one across the face. The one on the right hissed and bit the other one's ear. Soon they were entangled in a horrible, bloody struggle in the dust. "Cat fight!" Jack called encouragingly. But another cat had already broken ranks. It was a young, eager-looking one with bright yellow eyes. Opening its mouth, it sprang at Jack, bearing giant fangs. Jack waited until the last second, and stepped aside, casually. Unable to stop its forward momentum, the cat crashed into the stump, burying its ridiculously sharp teeth deep into the dead wood. It growled and shook its head from side to side, but couldn't pull free. "I'd go see a dentist about that, mate," Jack recommended. Meanwhile, Fitzwilliam was doing his best against one of the bigger cats. It parried its blade with its claws almost like a human opponent, a much, much stronger one. It whacked Fitzwilliam's sword aside again and again with powerful blows that sent him reeling. One knocked the aristocrat over, smashing his head against a large boulder. The cat roared in triumph, rearing back for the killing bite. But the boulder was, in actuality, the pterosaur. It whipped its head around and sliced its beak across the attacking cat's exposed neck. "Would you look at that?" Jack said, whistling. "By Davy Jones' locker. No, wait," he thought for a second, no longer wanting to invoke the dread captain's name. "By the Seven Seas. I think Drag is actually helping us." Fitzwilliam looked confused for a moment. Who is Drag? Jack rolled his eyes. Once again, the utter stupidity of others amazed him. "Your mount? Drag, as in dragon? The big lizardy flying thing we hitched a ride here on?" Drag gave a triumphant scream. It almost seemed to smile. "Good show there," the nobleman's son said, grinning. He patted it on its flank. "Well done." Jack looked around at the remaining cats. There were at least 20 of them left. Far too many for the two boys to fight off, even with the pterosaur helping them. He looked at Drag with a critical eye. Even if he or she couldn't take off easily with the two of them on him, or her, maybe they would be able to escape the worst blows up on its back. "Fitzy," Jack called. "As before, all aboard the beastie." Fitzwilliam turned to clamber up over the pterosaur's neck, but turning his back to the cats was a bad idea. One of them leaped up. Fitzwilliam tried to pull himself out of the way, but his feet still dangled. The cat swiped out with its claw, but missed Fitzwilliam. 3 more cats broke rank and charged him. Jack sheathed his sword. 1 or 2 cats he could have handled, but not 3. Not without another sword, maybe, or a dagger, or a musket, and a cannon. Basically, it was time for a strategic retreat. "Yarg!" he screamed, running for Drag. Fitzwilliam was now seated on the pterosaur's back. He put a hand out, ready to help Jack up. The captain of the barnacle leaped, putting all of his strength into it. It wasn't enough. A cat jumped at him. It clapped its paws together, catching his arm and pulling him right out of the air. "Jack!" Fitzwilliam cried. Their hands touched, but didn't hold. Jack fell. Right in the middle of the remaining cats. Drag kept whipping its neck out, snapping at this one and that one. But there were too many, advancing too quickly. Jack drew his sword again and began to slash with all his skill and might. He spun and jumped and parried and thrusted, but there were still too many attacking at once. This is a rotten way for old Jack to end, he muttered, eaten by a bunch of overgrown house cats with dental problems. A shadow fell over the land. A strong wind rose. What now? Jack demanded. More of this dancing hours business? Is it suddenly leap year? An eclipse? No, Jack, look, Fitzwilliam pointed up. Weaving in formation so tightly that they blocked out the sun was the largest flock of pterosaurs the two had seen yet. Hundreds of them, it seemed, huge and green and gray and screaming. Like vultures, Fitzwilliam said, shivering, waiting for the kill. I don't think so, Fitzy, Jack said slowly. They seemed to be eyeing the cats, not the two boys. What must have been the leader screamed out. It looked a lot like Drag. Same shape wings, same length tail. By Calypso's earrings, Jack swore, laughing. That's Drag's dad. Or mum, he added. As one, the pterosaurs dove and attacked. The cats hissed and yowled in response. It was one of the weirdest, bloodiest battles in history, or at least in Isla Esqueletica's history. Pterosaurs tore at cats with their beaks and their talons. Cats hissed and leaped, attacking with their claws and teeth. The pterosaurs made a ring around Drag, protecting him, or her. Fitzwilliam and Jack watched for a moment, transfixed. Then Jack tugged on Fitzwilliam's shirt sleeve. I think that's our cue to leave, mate, he said quietly. It was true. Neither cat nor pterosaur was paying attention to them. Even Drag was too busy saying hello to friends and fighting off the cats. Fitzwilliam slipped down off Drag's back and gave him, or her, a friendly pat goodbye. Then the two boys quickly and silently slipped away. They tried not to listen, but the piercing sounds of screams, roars, and hisses followed them until they were halfway over the next rise. Jack pulled out the pocket watch. He frowned when he saw the dial. That cost us over an hour, mate. Means we only have 10 and a half to set things back to normal. Are you even listening? He shouted, frustrated. But Fitzwilliam wasn't listening at all. He was staring slack-jawed out to sea. Jack squinted and looked. There was the Flying Dutchman, still stubbornly moored offshore under a sky that was half day, half night. Surrounding the cursed vessel was a fleet of 3 tall ships. All flew a blue flag with 3 white seagulls. Nice ships, Jack said appreciatively. But what's got you so moony-faced? That is the family crest of the explorer Leonardo Leone, Fitzwilliam said with awe. He sailed these waters over 200 years ago. We are watching history as it happens, Jack. He was the one who discovered these islands. Well, it looks like the island has discovered him, too. More to the point, Stone-Eyed Sam has, Jack said, pointing. Island warriors had boarded the boats and were taking their crews captive. What a lucky break. With Jones surrounded by famous historical figures, and famous historical figures all being hauled off by crazy men with glass weapons, no one was going to care about old Jack and Fitzy now. But suddenly, Jack realized something. We've got to stop them. We've got to make sure Leonardo and his crew explore all the explory places they do. Make the history they're supposed to. Fitzwilliam gave Jack a suspicious look. Day is night, the dead are living, flying dragons battle demonic cats. Why does this one thing upset you compared to all the other problems you have caused with the flow of time? We, mate, we caused. Your watch, my fiddling. It was a partnership, Jack countered. If Leone is hurt, or hypnotized, or killed, or eaten, or what have you, and doesn't return to Spain, Europeans won't find a small group of islands at the western edge of the East Indies. Like this one, for instance. At least not for some time. So? Fitzwilliam demanded. Again, what do you care? I did not think either history or geography were your strong points. Purely selfish reasons, mate, Jack said. If the tales Dad told me were true, and who really knows, what with the rum and all, I have some grandkin who met somewhere near Tortuga. He looked at Fitzwilliam expectantly. But the nobleman's son still looked confused, not understanding. Jack sighed. He spoke very slowly. If I can't save Leone, I might wipe out my own existence. If there is no Leonardo Leone, there is no Isla Esqueletica, no Tortuga, no Jack Sparrow. Savvy? So Jack is very worked up now after seeing Leonardo Leone's ships and making a connection to his own existence. But let me preface this and say that Leonardo Leone is not actually a real person, as he was made up for this book. But now we know who discovered the Caribbean islands in Pirates of the Caribbean lore, and it was Leonardo Leone. But Jack realizes that if Leonardo Leone doesn't discover the islands he is supposed to, he might not end up existing. So Jack tells Fitzy they need to save Leone, but Fitzy stops him and tells him they need to fix time, and that is the more pressing issue at hand. Also, I like how Fitzy explains himself, and he ends with imitating Jack by saying, "Savvy?" Which is kind of cool. But anyway, Jack agrees with Fitzy at the end and tells him that they need to go back into the water. And Jack specifically says they need help. And they need help from the one and only Tia Dalma. Fitzwilliam gets nervous, however, at the mention of Tia Dalma, since, if you remember, he is still marked by her until she gets her payment. And also, if you remember, her payment is Fitzy's pocket watch. So Jack gives the order to head back to the barnacle, stealthy-like this time. So a little later, Jack and Fitzy make it to the beach, and they have to find a way to get back to the barnacle without drawing attention to themselves. So let's see what Jack plans to do here. So in the book, it says, there was an old skiff drawn on shore, which would be useful for getting into the barnacle, but Jack stopped Fitzwilliam as he began to shove the little boat over the sand to the water. If we start rowing our way out there, we'll be sitting ducks for the entire world to see, Jack pointed out. Every ugly bird, insane sea captain with storm powers, brainwashed Aztec, undead sea captain with sword powers, unfriendly native volcano goddess, and slimy tentacled sea captain will be able to see us and do that thing where they, get us. You do have a point, Fitzwilliam said, but what can we do? Even if you could swim the whole distance, they would still see us. Jack didn't miss the fact that Fitzwilliam had said you. The nobleman's son probably fancied himself a stellar swimmer. Jack could swim, if he had to, in a pinch. Always coming up with downsides, never solutions. Not much of an ideas man, are you, Fitzy? Thank goodness for old Jack and his brains, he said, praising himself. Here's what we'll do, mate. We'll turn this little boat here right over, right? Then we'll walk under the water with it, keeping it over our heads with a pocket of air for us to breathe. The plan had leaped to his mind full blown. It was strange, almost like he had somehow thought it all through at some point before. That is the stupidest idea I have ever heard, Fitzwilliam declared. It will never work. No, it really will, Jack said, getting a strange look on his face. Trust me, I think I've done this before. Or maybe after. Some other time. I've definitely done it. Some when. Ironically, something about the way Jack hesitated made Fitzwilliam believe it. Jack certainly wasn't acting like his usual, lying by the seat of his pants self. As quickly as they could, they hoisted the skiff up over their heads and walked into the sea. Jack was in front, of course, so Fitzwilliam had to trust that he knew where they were going. Walking was difficult. The underwater sand was deep and mucky, and it was very slow going. The small pocket of air under the boat became stale and smelled very, very bad, very, very quickly. At one point, Jack was positive that a small school of squid tried to nibble at his knees. Another time, an eerie large gathering of pure white crabs scuttled past them, clacking their claws with black eyes fixed on some unknown destination. But Jack's sense of direction was spot on. They almost tripped over the anchor and rope of the barnacle. They carefully put the skiff aside and swam up the rope, throwing themselves overboard quickly, so as not to attract any attention. By grace, that has done it, Fitzwilliam cheered as they hauled up the anchor. Jack grinned and stood behind the wheel, the only place he really felt right. He had a very powerful, strange sense of déjà vu. He shook his head to free himself of it. The two boys turned to wave goodbye to Isla Escalatica, giddy about having made it off the island. The scene they were leaving sobered them some, however. The sky was divided neatly down the middle of the island, with stars and dark sky blanketing one side, and golden sun pouring down on the other. Jack stood on the barnacle's bowsprit and surveyed the island. The volcano was puffing angry black smoke. Flocks of pterosaurs hovered in the air. Clouds roiled at the edge of the horizon, blowing backward and making strange, ugly shapes. A hollow wind blew. It is like the apocalypse, the end of the world, Fitzwilliam said softly. Whatever, mate. At least we're free from it, Jack smiled smugly. His plan with the skiff was brilliant, and they were free. All was good with the world, thanks to him. And then a loud, ominous thudding noise came from behind them. Fitzwilliam and Jack looked at each other, then slowly turned around. And there, his tentacles twitching, stood Davy Jones. So Davy Jones is back. But before we get to that, let's address the insanely great callback, or I guess you could call it a call ahead at this point in time, to the iconic underwater boat scene from The Curse of the Black Pearl. I think it's really cool they put this in, and it does work because Jack gets deja vu when he thinks of the idea. And so because of time being all out of order on Isla Escalatica, Jack is remembering doing this with Will in the future and using that plan here in the present with Fitzy. So I love this. I think it's so cool. But anyway, Davy Jones is back, so let's see what happens next. So in the book it says, Jack grinned one of his especially irritating grins. It was a grin of complete and absolute smugness. It started in the middle of his mouth and worked slowly out to the edges, curling up at the end of his lips. Fitzwilliam began to get nervous. It didn't pay to be smug around a powerful creature like Davy Jones. "Welcome aboard, mate," Jack said. He tipped his hat at a jaunty angle. "Although, once again, I was not asked permission. One captain to another. It's just basic politeness." "As one captain to another," Davy Jones growled, his words bubbling, "I'm thinking about sending you to the bottom of the sea." "Oh, I don't think you'll be doing that," Jack said casually. "I don't think you ever hurt me, as long as I have the watch." Fitzwilliam and Jones both expected Jack to pull out the pocket watch triumphantly and wave it in the tentacled captain's face. But for once he was showing a little restraint. Instead, he cupped it protectively in his hands, just in case any tentacles whipped out and tried to grab it. Jack couldn't help looking at the dial. Only 8 hours left. They didn't have time to be mucking around with the cursed sea captain. Davy Jones was too furious to reply. The tips of his tentacles curled and writhed in anger. His weird eyes filled with demonic light. Jack took one step backward, behind Fitzwilliam. Jones shook himself and tapped his staff on the deck. "It matters not. I have everything I need," he said, more to himself than the two boys. He frowned in concentration. "All that is left is to lock him up for safekeeping, until the time is right." He rapped on the deck again with his staff. Out of the shadows came two horrible creatures. They were part human, like Jones, but just barely. One scuttled sideways and clacked hands above his head that were really ugly, bumpy claws. Instead of normal eyes, he glared at them from two eye stalks that twitched above his brow. The other sailor was slimy and thin, with almost no arms at all. His mouth was a lipless circle ringed with triangular teeth. "Each," Jack couldn't help saying. "The crab I get, but what's the other? Remora? Eel? Some sort of other weird sea thingy?" Before he and Fitzwilliam could even get to their swords, two more cursed sailors appeared behind them, grabbing their arms. Jack shook the watch to get Jones' attention. "I'll drop it. I will. I'll crush it if you lay a hand or claw or fin on my head. Our heads," he added after Fitzwilliam glared at him. "Oh, do be careful with them," Jones cooed sarcastically to his crew. "Treat them with all the respect they deserve. From one captain to another." Clouds boiled on the horizon. The Flying Dutchman appeared out of the darkness next to the barnacle. The cursed crew set up a gangplank between the two ships. Jack and Fitzwilliam were shoved forward as the fishy sailors laughed, creaked, and made other horrible noises. The two boys tried to keep brave faces as they were forced below decks, but the Flying Dutchman was nightmarish. From the smell, everything seemed to be rotting, to the sounds of the crew making their way wordlessly around the ship, to the very bulkheads themselves. Between the coral and old shells and bones, Jack swore he saw a pair of eyes open and blink at him. He shuddered. But the brig was more or less like any other ship's brig, dark, damp, and locked. "This is all your fault," Fitzwilliam cried the moment their captors had left. Now, Fitzy, don't get your breeches in a twist," Jack said comfortingly. "Look at it this way, mate. We the first living sailors to have ever boarded the Flying Dutchman and gotten back off again." "You were assuming quite a lot there, Jack," Fitzwilliam pointed out, "especially the part where we managed to get off again." "I'll think of something. Don't you worry," Jack promised. "That is exactly what makes me worry. You thinking of something," Fitzwilliam shot back. "Ah, listen to the two lovebirds," a haunting voice came from behind them. "I'm surprised you made it this far together." The two boys turned. Standing in the shadows was none other than Tia Dalma. She revealed her creepy blue-stained toothed smile at them. Fitzwilliam put his hand to his neck, touching the crab mark she had placed there. "Fancy meeting you here," Jack said, trying not to look surprised. "Coincidentally, we were just on our way to find you." Tia Dalma snatched the watch out of Jack's hand. Wonder why Jones did not try that," Fitzwilliam observed. Jack glared at him. "Ah, there it is," Tia Dalma breathed. She held the watch up delicately between two fingers, like it was an egg. "What was lost from you was found again." "No offense, milady," Jack said, interrupting what sounded like the beginning of one of her long, creepy speeches, "but you seem awful calm considering where we are. In whose boat, I mean. The man with the tentacles is what I'm saying. Who has us all captured." But Tia Dalma just ignored him. "This watch holds great power, witty Jack," she continued. Yes, yes, we know all that," Jack said impatiently. Sometimes Tia Dalma could take a while to get to the point. Then she frowned, noticing the hands of the watch. An even darker shadow fell over the brig. There was something scary and powerful about Tia Dalma, almost like Chantico. "Jack," she drew out his name. "Have you been playing with this thing?" "No," Jack answered immediately. Fitzwilliam rolled his eyes. Tia Dalma glared at him. "Jack," she prodded. "Maybe a little," he admitted. He held his finger and thumb closely together to show her how little. "Jack!" Her voice rang out. Her eyes flashed. The two boys could feel power building in the room. Angry power. "Fine, quite a lot then," Jack said peevishly. "The hours have been dancing, though the hands are now still," she observed. Fitzwilliam mouthed the words questioningly at Jack. What did she mean? After all, the hands were moving, back to 12. Jack shrugged and made a crazy gesture, twirling his finger next to his head. "Your time is running out, Jack Sparrow. This will be a greater task than it should have been," Tia Dalma continued, shaking her head. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jack demanded. Tia Dalma smiled and shook the watch. "This has great history behind it, Jack. It was discovered not long after the last gathering of the Brethren Court of Pirate Lords." "The Brethren what of Pirate who?" Fitzwilliam demanded. Jack shushed him. It looked like she was actually about to impart some important information, a rare thing for her to do. For free, anyway. The pirate Tartaglia had it first. Him was a little man, more thief than sailor, but him sensed its power. Him used the watch as a false piece of eight to fool other pirates into believing him was a pirate lord. "What piece of eight? How could anyone mistake that watch for a coin? And how does that make you a pirate lord?" Fitzwilliam whispered. Jack shushed him again. If only Arabella were here, she could explain things to the aristocrat, and she would be thrilled to learn about these legends firsthand. But what Tartaglia did not know was his true power. The watchmaker who made it was also an alchemist. Him made it so the watch could do more than tell time. Him made it so it could alter time itself. She pointed up at the deck above him. Eventually, Davy Jones heard about it. The poor, broken-hearted spirit believed him could harness its powers for his own use. This time, both Fitzwilliam and Jack looked at each other. Broken-hearted spirit? The evil tentacled thing that had thrown them all in here had a heart? Him believed he could use it to return to the moment when him true love, the goddess Calypso, disappeared from him. Him would go and prevent her from doing so. She sashayed slowly across the room to Jack. "The watch has been kept hidden from Jones for many long years. Until now." She glared at him, her face just inches from his. "What do we do to fix the watch?" he asked politely, unsure how all this fit in with its present predicament. "There is only one way to stop the hours from dancing. You must find a person who doesn't belong in this present moment of time." She spoke without blinking. It was extremely unnerving. Jack forced himself not to step backward. He smiled sheepishly. "Easy enough," he said, blustering. "Finding a mate who doesn't belong. The island's crawling with them. Be done by lunch." "But there's more, Jack Sparrow," Tia Dalma whispered. Jack sighed. "Of course there is. The person out of time must be standing under the moon and sun, and must be in possession of the watch, and then let it go before it strikes the 12th chime. It must be removed from him grasp. If not, all of time will collapse on itself, and doom and chaos will rule on these 7 seas. "Ugh," Jack gulped. "And if you choose the wrong person," she continued, "someone who does belong in this present moment of time, time will remain warped forever." "In other words, we must be very careful to whom we hand the watch," Fitzwilliam translated needlessly. "That might be a bit more difficult." "Ah, yes, and it's complicated a teensy bit more," Jack pointed out sarcastically, "by the fact that we're locked up on the ship of the poor, broken-hearted spirit, Davy Jones, who would just as soon drown Jack as take the watch." "Aye," Jack had added, a little testedly. "Leave that to me," Tia Dalma said with a mysterious smile. "I hate it when she says that," Jack complained. The mystic made her way over to the port-side bulkhead. Like the rest of the ship, instead of wood, it was a nasty mishmash of bones and dead sea things. She leaned forward, almost touching it with her lips, and whispered, Several shells and pieces of seaweed slid aside and a dead-looking face appeared in the ship's hull. Fitzwilliam and Jack recoiled in horror. Tia Dalma again whispered, now in a language that neither boy understood. With wet, creaking noises, the man in the hull moved out of the way, opening a hole in the ship's wall. Tia Dalma stood aside and gave the boys a triumphant smile. Jack stuck his head out through the hole and looked down. It was a long way to the water, but their only hope. Tia Dalma placed the watch in Jack's hand and closed his fingers around it. It is still my watch, Fitzwilliam mumbled. People seem to keep forgetting that. See you on the other side, gentlemen, she drawled, then jumped. Blimey, Jack breathed. Then he turned and saluted Fitzwilliam and also jumped. The nobleman followed, saying a quick prayer under his breath. The three of them hit the water with a slap and began swimming for their lives. So a lot just went down in that chapter, so let's break it down real quick. First of all, we see some members of the Flying Dutchman's crew, and from the descriptions we get of two of them, one is more crab-like and the other is described as slimy and thin, with almost no arms and a circular mouth with triangular teeth. But Jack and Fitzy are thrown into the brig, where Tia Dalma magically appears, and of course, the two of them have no idea why she isn't concerned to be on the Dutchman like they are, but we, of course, know why. And another big thing revealed in this chapter is the history of the pocket watch, and how it had been made by a watchmaker who also happened to be an alchemist, and it was first owned by Tartaglia, who used it to make other pirates believe he was a pirate lord. And after all this, Davy Jones began searching for it for his own uses. And along with that, we also find out what Jack and Fitzy have to do to set time straight, and they need to find someone who doesn't belong in the present time. So we pick up with Jack, Fitzy, and Tia Dalma, who have escaped the Flying Dutchman and have made it to shore. And once they get there, they are cornered by a bunch of the Aztec warriors, but Tia Dalma uses her magic to rid them of the brainwashing and bring them back to their original selves. So we see that these are all normal sailors who had been captured by Stone-Eyed Sam and brainwashed into being his soldiers. So all these sailors are now gripping with their clothes they're wearing, their piercings they have in their ears and noses and all kinds of things. And Jack initially thinks that the captain of these guards, that back in the last book, he thinks this guy is the guy that is the man out of time. So Jack goes over to this guy, but Tia Dalma stops him and makes him rethink his decision. And Jack realizes she knows about Stone-Eyed Sam being alive again, even though he never told her he was. And Jack is also confused why she was in the brig on the Dutchman before them, but Tia Dalma doesn't answer any of these questions as she looks at the pocket watch and realizes they only have 1 hour left, and she admits to them that the time works differently aboard the Flying Dutchman, which is interesting. So they hurry over to Stone-Eyed Sam's palace, and they notice Captain Torrents is making his way inside. So they follow him, making sure to avoid the traps, and they hide behind a treasure chest to watch the meeting between Torrents and Stone-Eyed Sam. So let's go see what happens next. So in the book it says, the mad pirate king sat on his throne, with the powerful sword of Cortez across his lap unsheathed. His right hand lay upon the pommel. He was looking upward and chanting. Jack and his friends also looked up. There, suspended over a pit of what looked like boiling lava, locked in a giant cage, was Leonardo Leone and his crew. Jack gulped. It looked dangerous. One false move and splat. There went his history. But the sailors weren't trying to escape. They looked kind of dazed, in fact. Their eyes were half closed, and some of them were humming along to the chanting by the Pirate King. Ahoy there, Stone-Eyed said, looking away from his captives and greeting Torrents. His stone eye glittered eerily in torchlight. My warriors have told tale of you. You'll make a fine addition to my army, what with your ability to control the tempers of the earth. In fact, I was just in the middle of indoctrinating some new troops. I'm not here to join you in your motley bag, Torrents rumbled at the thunder he could summon. His eyes began to flash. I'm here to collect something that doesn't rightly belong to you. The sword of Cortez, Torrents explained. None other than Davy Jones appointed me to retrieve it, so it'd be best if you just handed it over, politely, and I'll be on my way. Not on your thrice accursed hide, Stone-Eyed roared, leaping up with the sword. Torrents grinned and pulled his own sword. It was obvious he had been expecting a fight and looking forward to it. Stone-Eyed Sam brought the fabled sword down, muttering something as he did. It glowed red and flashed. Torrents parried with his own cutlass, and then sent little bolts of lightning along it for a good measure. A wind rose up, putting out most of the torches in the room. Tia Dalma freed the remaining Aztecs, and most fled the throne room. In the semi-darkness, the two powerful pirates fought back and forth, their swords clanging. The air itself was lit on fire from the magic being wielded, electric blue, fiery red, and an angry ghoulish green. Stone-Eyed Sam pointed the sword of Cortez at Torrents. Bolts of energy flew at his head. Torrents threw his hand up. An angry black cloud appeared between them, swallowing all the magic. Stone-Eyed Sam roared and swung his sword again like a normal weapon. Torrents ducked to avoid the blow. It hit the stone wall behind him with a mighty clang. Chunks of rock went flying. "That is such a nice sword," Jack sighed. "How much time do we have left?" Fitzwilliam whispered, ignoring Jack. 20 minutes, Tia Dalma answered mechanically, without even looking at the watch. Jack had to do something. Quick. Stone-Eyed Sam definitely didn't belong in the present moment of time. He was one of the few people on the whole island that Jack was positive should have been dead. He had seen his skeleton himself. There was, of course, also the explorer hanging from the ceiling, Leonardo Leone, who should have died at least 200 years ago. But he was a lot harder to get to, what with being in a cage up above a pit. Then Jack remembered. If it were to be Stone-Eyed, he would have to be outside, under the moon and sun. Jack leaped up and started waving. "Hey, Stoney, look it, it's your old mate Jack. Woohoo, over here." "What in the blazes are you doing, Jack?" Fitzwilliam hissed. "Trying to attract Mr. Undead's attention, to lure him outside," Jack explained. But what Jack forgot was that both pirates, Stone-Eyed Sam and Torrents, had a score to settle with him. They stopped their fighting and turned on Jack. Jack gulped. Stone-Eyed pointed the sword and shot a bolt of energy at him. Torrents held his fists out and cast lightning at him. Jack threw himself aside, barely avoiding both lethal daggers. Torrents took advantage of Stone-Eyed Sam's momentary distraction and tried to swipe at him with his sword. Stone-Eyed responded by chanting something. The sword of Cortez glowed green, and crackling embers launched themselves at Torrents. Jack, Tia Dalma, and Fitzwilliam dove for cover. Jack popped up again like a rabbit. "Remember me? Over here!" Stone-Eyed barely looked over, tossing a bolt of energy at him with the tip of his sword. Jack rolled out of the way, and almost right into the small cyclone Torrents had summoned. "This is getting ridiculous," he muttered. Fitzwilliam was helping Tia Dalma clamber behind a stone bench. Nasty bits of the supernatural were now loose all over the room. Jack drew his sword and leaped into the fray, hoping to get Stone-Eyed Sam's attention with a well-aimed blow. But nothing too damaging. He still had to get the pirate to chase him outside. Jack quickly brought up his cutlass and used its gold tip to slice across the top of the mad pirate's pants. The cloth tore and pulled away, revealing brightly colored knickers beneath. Stone-Eyed Sam hissed with rage and shot fiery bolts at Jack. But then he turned and deflected an attack from Torrents of 3 little dust devils aimed at his throat. "No sense of dignity at all," Jack sniffed, hopping as the fiery bolts hit the floor near his feet. The pirate didn't really care about his exposed knickers. He just wanted to kill Torrents. And Jack. "Jack," Fitzwilliam called out, "we do not have much time." Jack gave him an exasperated look. "What does it look like I'm doing, mate? Mending my nets?" A tiny lightning bolt struck him on his backside. He leaped, trying to keep from screaming. His own pants smoked a little. Watching the two pirates, his eyes narrowed. There was only one thing Stone-Eyed Sam seemed to care about besides getting Jack and Torrents: the sword of Cortez. Jack quickly jumped in between the two powerful pirates. He slashed his cutlass out of Stone-Eyed, slicing him across his sword hand, and grabbed the sword of Cortez as the pirate dropped it, howling. Jack had to admit, for all the trouble it had caused him, it felt good to finally hold the sword again. Quick as a sparrow, Jack made for the door. His arms flailed as he pranced away. Fitzwilliam and Tia Dalma quickly took off after him. So did Stone-Eyed Sam, and so did Torrents. "Chin up, Leo," Jack called back to the explorer and his poor captive crew. "Stay there, and if everything goes to plan, time will go back to normal. You'll go back to your right era, or is it epoch, and Jack Sparrow will be born right proper." So things are getting pretty dire now, as there are mere minutes left on the clock, literally, and Stone-Eyed Sam and Captain Torrents are chasing Jack down. So he leads both of them outside, and the fight continues. So let's see what happens next. So Chapter 9 begins and says, under a sunny day and sparkling night, outside a lost pirate city full of people who should have been dead, Jack Sparrow fought for his life against the two pirates. With his cutlass in his left hand and the sword of Cortez in his right, he parried and ducked desperately. Even without his powerful sword, Stone-Eyed Sam was a dangerous opponent. He was clearly raving mad. From his belt, he pulled 2 glittering jeweled daggers, as delicate as dragonflies. He spun and slashed with them like a berserker. Torrents just stood back and launched lightning bolts and hurricane winds. Jack could deflect the bolts and slice through the winds with the Sword of Cortez, but only if he wasn't using it to ward off blows from Stone-Eyed Sam. Fitzwilliam finally drew his sword, prepared to jump in and help Jack. Torrents casually waved his hand over the shoulder. A cyclone blew out and picked up the aristocrat. It carried him over to the top of a tree and stranded him in its highest branches. "Sorry, Jack," Fitzwilliam said weakly, clinging desperately. "It's the thought that counts," Jack called back. His head was spinning from looking back and forth at the 2 pirates. How was he going to get Stone-Eyed Sam to hold the watch? He lunged at the mad pirate's chest with the Sword of Cortez. Stone-Eyed Sam crossed his arms and caught its blade between the 2 daggers. He yanked, and the Sword of Cortez went flying out of Jack's grasp and into Sam's. "Blast!" Jack spat. Immediately, Stone-Eyed Sam pointed the sword, sending bolts of energy back and forth at Jack and Torrents. Both leaped out of the way. Then Torrents called forth a tiny cyclone and sent it spinning up at Stone-Eyed Sam's right arm. The storm pirate closed his hand into a fist, and the cyclone shrunk. It crushed the blade out of Stone-Eyed Sam's hand. The Pirate King howled with rage and pulled out his 2 daggers again, charging at Torrents. Jack dove for the sword, but a dust devil got to it first, carrying it back to Torrents. Torrents took it, tossing his own sword aside. He immediately started shooting lightning bolts out of his left hand and energy bolts out of his right with the Sword of Cortez. Jack turned to attack Torrents to try and get the sword back. Then he stopped. The point of this crazy little exercise was to keep Stone-Eyed Sam distracted while handing him the watch outside, under the moon and sun. In the battle for the sword, he had almost forgotten that. Now was a perfect time to hand the watch to Stone-Eyed Sam, while he was occupied fighting Torrents. Jack pulled the watch out, unsure how to do it. Then Torrents set a bolt of lightning at Stone-Eyed Sam's left hand. It heated the dagger white hot. The pirate dropped it, screaming. When Stone-Eyed Sam went to attack Torrents again, Jack darted nimbly in behind him. He swung the watch over his head like a bola. Fitzwilliam and Tia Dalma both grimaced. It was a delicate, powerful, magical time-altering watch, after all. Jack let it go. The watch flew through the air and neatly wrapped itself around Stone-Eyed Sam's left wrist and dangled precariously from his hand. "Let's hope that's close enough," Jack breathed. The watch then began to chime. Ching! Meanwhile, with an unearthly effort, Stone-Eyed Sam sunk his remaining dagger into Torrents' thigh and then punched straight up into Storm Pirate's face. Torrents roared as the blood coming from his broken nose blinded him. Stone-Eyed Sam grabbed him and threw him over his shoulder to the ground. Ching! Jack stood nervously aside, wondering if he should help, or attack Torrents, or just stay out of the way. Torrents bellowed. A small hurricane rose up around the 2 pirates, sweeping up leaves and debris. They scrabbled in the dirt, partially hidden by the clouds of dust. Ching! Stone-Eyed Sam rolled out, clutching the Sword of Cortez. The pocket watch on him flew about, but it was still wrapped around his wrist. Torrents screamed. Lightning flashed. He was losing control of his anger and his curse. Ching! "How many was that?" Jack called out. 4, Fitzwilliam shouted. Stone-Eyed Sam snaked one bony hand around Jack's ankle and pulled. Unprepared, Jack fell forward, hitting the dirt face first. Ching! "I've had enough of your interference," Stone-Eyed Sam roared. He grinned insanely, each of his crooked teeth glowing in the blood-red light of the sword. He reached into his shirt and pulled out a curved knife. "How many bloody weapons do you have on you?" Jack demanded, desperately trying to pull away. Ching! A blast of lightning got Stone-Eyed Sam in the back of the head, burning great chunks of his hair off. He shrieked in pain. Torrents rose. His face was black and blue and swollen. "Thanks, mate," Jack said cheerfully, extricating himself from the other pirate's grasp. Torrents responded by shooting another bolt at Jack. Ching! Jack tries to raise his cutlass to block the bolt, but he was still quite winded, and it grazed him, shocking him and knocking him down. Torrents turned back to Stone-Eyed Sam. Hail the size of small cannonballs began to fall from the sky. Stone-Eyed Sam just grinned and held up the Sword of Cortez. A ray of red energy shot out, evaporating the hail as it fell. Ching! "The watch!" Tia Dalma called out. Jack was too wounded and too tired for a witty reply. He put a hand to his side. The last blow must have broken a rib or two. He pulled himself up, using his cutlass as a crutch. How many chimes had the pocket watch played? 8? 9? Ching! With a howl, Stone-Eyed Sam brought the Sword of Cortez down so its red rays hit Torrents in the eyes. The huge pirate staggered back, clutching his face. Grinning, Stone-Eyed Sam leaped up with renewed energy. He turned to Jack. His whole body was glowing red now, even the socket behind his stone eye. Ching! The red energy reached over to Jack. He was paralyzed. A heat far worse than the volcanoes began to build up on his skin. Jack sank to his knees in pain. Ching! Stone-Eyed Sam, with smoke rising from where the lightning had burned him, stood over Jack. With an incoherent scream, he raised the Sword of Cortez over Jack's head. Jack! Fitzwilliam cried. Jack looked up as the cursed sword came down toward his head. There was nothing he could do. He was too weak to roll aside. It didn't matter anyway. The watch was about to chime a 12th time, and when it did, Jack would vanish as history was erased from underneath him. Ching! Just before the clock struck 12, a hand whipped out and yanked the watch off of Stone-Eyed Sam's wrist. It was Tia Dalma. Immediately, Stone-Eyed Sam started to fade. His skin turned gray and began to peel back from his flesh. The rest of him then burned away, until all that was left was a single plume of white smoke. The sword vanished too, to Jack's disappointment. Torrents remained, but he had been knocked out cold by the blast of power from the Sword of Cortez. Good thing I hadn't handed him the watch, Jack muttered, dusting himself off. A great shifting of light and shadow occurred in the sky above. The night sky quickly disappeared, leaving only daylight. The flocks of wheeling uglybirds vanished. Down on the beach, the Aztec sailors also faded one by one. Behold, Tia Dalma said, pointing at the temple. In seconds, the stones aged and crumbled, while vines grew up over everything. A thin, bony dust settled. Jack raced back into the throne room. It was just the way he had found it, broken and ruined, with no explorers dangling in a cage from the ceiling. Whew! History and my seafaring self are saved. Jack groaned in relief, leaning against a pillar. The tree Fitzwilliam was in aged and fell over gracefully. He hopped out, surprised by his easy release. Tia Dalma reached over and placed a soft finger on his neck. Fitzwilliam jumped at the personal contact. My mark has vanished, she explained with a smile. The crab tattoo she had magically placed on him was gone. I told you when you delivered my payment you would be unmarked, she grinned. Now, there is just one thing left to do. So now the big confrontation is over, time is back to normal, and everything is as it should be. But we aren't done yet. Tia Dalma, along with Jack and Fitzy, head back to the shore, and Tia Dalma yells out the name of Davy Jones. So let's see what happens here. So as I said, Tia Dalma yells, Davy Jones! She called out to the Flying Dutchman. She almost sounded like an angry mother calling for a wayward child. Jack and Fitzwilliam looked at each other, confused and nervous. No offense, but I don't know if that's just the best course of action, Jack said. We've just spent the better part of the day getting away from Captain Jones. Tia Dalma just smiled. Dutchman, I demand you allow me aboard. Oh, Jones is truly not going to like that, Fitzwilliam said sorrowfully. Clouds gathered on the horizon. The sea churned and boiled around the Dutchman. A wind blew down the beach so hard it blasted sand into Jack and Fitzwilliam's eyes. When they looked up, there was a skiff bobbing in the waters, apparently waiting for Tia Dalma. It was empty but for a single lantern in the prow. She smiled and stepped delicately in. We'll wait here then, Jack said. She did not turn back. In moments, the skiff disappeared into the fog. A half hour later, Fitzwilliam and Jack were still waiting for her. The aristocrat stood stiff as a board, hand to his eyes for a better view. Jack sat in the sand, kicking it into little mounds. Suddenly, the sea boiled again. Like a horrible ancient sea monster, the Flying Dutchman slowly submerged underwater. Gray and yellow foam bubbled up from where it had disappeared. Good Lord, what now? Fitzwilliam cried out. Jack frowned. Was she a prisoner of Davy Jones again? Fare thee well, Davy Jones, came an amused voice from behind the boys. Jack jumped up. Fitzwilliam spun around. There stood Tia Dalma, looking smug and dry. I'll never know how you do these things, Jack observed. What the blazes did you do to make him go away? We discussed the ways of the winds and the voices of the sea, Tia Dalma said. A look of sorrow passed over her face. I do believe him see the error of his ways now. Should he try to return to that time Calypso had forsaken him, she would tear him hard out for him, and nothing would be different this day. This trinket is useless now. Its power is gone. She opened up her hand and dropped the watch into Jack's. "Hello? It is still mine," Fitzwilliam complained. "My pirate napped sister gave it to me before she disappeared." Jack rolled his eyes and tossed the watch over his shoulder. Fitzwilliam dove to catch it before it landed in the sand. Jack was about to say something funny, something really good to Tia Dalma, when he felt a sudden wave of heat behind him. Chantico appeared in a blur of flame. She stepped forward, and though the grass was alight with flame, it was not consumed. And then she did something completely unexpected. She bowed to Tia Dalma. "Too much time has passed since we last met," the volcano goddess said in her strange, icy voice. And then something else unexpected happened. Tia Dalma looked lost. She frowned and clicked her tongue in anguish. "Forgive me. I am only beginning to remember who I am and where I have been. You will remember all things in time, and you will be free again. I am sure of it," Chantico said with a very, very small smile. Tia Dalma frowned again, trying hard to remember, but it was no use. Jack raised his eyebrows. What was all this? Probably from spending too much time in the swamps, he decided. That would drive you right batty. Just like this whole batty conversation. They never make sense when you talk to them one-on-one, soothsayers and goddesses and whatnot, but put them together and abandon hope all ye who enter here. Captain Jack Sparrow, Fitzwilliam P. Dalton III, Chantico said, turning to them. You have reversed the course of the watch and set the moon and stars back on their normal paths. A simple thank you would be good enough, Jack said, unless you have gold. You don't, do you? Have gold, I mean? Do goddesses ever dabble in precious metals? Chantico gave him a frosty look, which was odd considering the flames dancing around her head. Why should you be thanked for correcting what you yourself corrupted? She demanded. I suppose that makes some sort of sense, in a volcano goddess sort of way, Jack said. Then he gave her a low bow. Well, I must be on my way, back to my ship and all. So much to do, so many people to see, or avoid, or both. Will you be needing a lift, Miss Dalma? There was no answer. Jack looked up, still bowing. But no one was there except for Fitzwilliam. The two women were gone. Okay, so the pocket watch is now powerless, according to Tia Dalma, and we also get to see Chantico one more time, who bows to Tia Dalma, and obviously we know why, because Tia Dalma is Calypso in human form, but Jack and Fitzy have no clue. We also find out that not even Tia Dalma knows everything about her goddess form, and she didn't even recognize Chantico at first. But now both goddesses are gone, and Jack and Fitzwilliam are left alone once again. But there is a little bit left, and fair warning, this is going to be huge. Brace yourselves for something crazy, and you know what I'm talking about if you've read this book before. So let's take a look. So Fitzwilliam begins and says, So where are we off to now, Jack? Fitzwilliam asked, slashing at a bit of undergrowth with a flourish of his sword. I'm off for more adventure with real treasure this time. Not volcanoes and drags and dead sea captains. X marks the spot, mate. That's what it's all about. Or maybe a vacation, he said, suddenly looking thoughtful. Fiji, maybe? Crystal waters, blue skies, friendly locals. I would rather like to see the East, Fitzwilliam said. The Indies, or even Japan. I have read about some of their temples and feats of engineering. Most remarkable. Jack mouthed what the nobleman's son was saying, rolling his eyes. This isn't one of those schools on a ship, Fitzy. This is the Barnacle. And this is... He stopped. This is what, Jack? Fitzwilliam asked. Traditionally, he waited until the end of one of Jack's rants before delivering a snotty reply. He didn't want to break form now. But Jack was stopped dead still. His jaw had dropped open. A look of horror was on his face, one that Fitzwilliam had never seen before. Not even when they came upon monsters, sirens, serpents, port officials, or rotten fish. He was staring out to sea. There, just beyond the Barnacle and gaining fast on her, was a run-down pirate ship. It flew a Jolly Roger that apparently Jack Sparrow was all too familiar with. We've got to get out of here, mate, Jack said, panicking. He took off toward the barnacle, almost falling on the sand several times in his hysteria. There was no joking, fast talking, elaborate explanations, or ridiculous scheming. He just ran for his boat. Fitzwilliam followed. Jack didn't say a word the whole time they rowed the tiny skiff out to the barnacle, or when they climbed aboard. Once on deck, however, Jack let out a scream. He pointed out to sea, speechless for once. The Royal Navy was on the horizon. In fact, it was what looked like the whole Royal Navy, in neat, crowded formation, coming up fast on the pirate ship and the barnacle. "Haul anchor!" Jack commanded. He reached down and began pulling on the anchor's line for dear life. "I wish we had the Fleur de la Mort." Jack rushed over to the sails and unfurled them himself, not even waiting for Fitzwilliam. He spun the wheel. He tested the wind. He blew into the sails as hard as he could, puffing his cheeks. But the barnacle was just a little boat, and Jack didn't have the power to command the winds. They only had 200 feet on the pirate ship now, and less than a half league on the Navy. It would be only a matter of minutes before they were overcome. Short of a miracle, nothing could stop this from happening. "Blast and blighters!" Jack swore, pacing up and down the deck, running his hands wildly through his hair. "Does anyone else magical owe me a favor?" he thought desperately. "The sea hag? No, not since that one time I stood her up. The north wind? What do I do? What do I do?" Then he felt a sharp point in his back. He turned around slowly, too stunned to put his hands in the air. It was Fitzwilliam, and he had his rapier aimed at Jack's middle. He looked much more relaxed than usual. In fact, his whole countenance had changed. "We knew you'd lead us to him," he growled in a much deeper voice than he normally used. "Fitzy?" Jack said, honestly confused. "What on earth is going on here?" But the other boy ignored him, continuing his rant. "Pretend to be a teenage aristocrat, they told me. Sneak aboard whatever boat they steal, they said. I told them they were foolish to think you would ever lead us to him, but how wrong I was. You, a petty boy, who's not even a proper pirate. Hey, watch what you say about your captain," Jack said weakly, swallowing hard. "Now we have both of you," Fitzwilliam continued. "Jack Sparrow and the most wanted pirate on the seven seas, the keeper of the pirate code. Teague." The boy grinned nastily. "Prepare to meet your fate, Sparrow. You and your dear daddy, if that rumor be true and he is the devil what spawned you, you will both perish at the hands of the Royal Navy of England." And that is the end of Dance of the Hours. So let's address the elephant in the room here, and well, actually, there are multiple elephants in the room. First of all, probably the most important is Fitzwilliam. Now, let me tell you, when I first read this, I gasped so loudly here that I was in complete disbelief at this. We will find out more in the next book, but for now, yeah, Fitzy has betrayed Jack in the worst way possible. He has been spying on Jack the whole time to try and capture Jack's father, Edward Teague. But that is another thing here, and it is pretty ambiguous as to if Teague really is Jack's dad or not. Obviously, in the movies, it's very clear that he is indeed Jack's dad, especially in On Stranger Tides, when Jack literally calls him his dad. But we will find out in the next book, and also later on in The Price of Freedom, that is a little more confusing than what we originally believed. So yeah, do not miss the next book that we are covering here, which is the 10th book in the Young Jack Sparrow series, which is titled Sins of the Father. This is without a doubt my favorite book in this whole series, and you are not going to want to miss what happens. I can't even begin to describe how exciting this next book is. And in addition to learning more about Fitzy and Teague, I'll give you a little teaser about who else we'll see in the next book. There are two characters, actually, that are going to pop up, but I'll tease one of them, and that one is Jack's most loyal first mate. You guys all know who that is. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and thank you if you have rated or reviewed the podcast wherever you listen to it. If you missed it, I now have merchandise available for the podcast on TeePublic, and that will be linked in the description of this episode. Also, by the time this episode releases, we will have passed the 2-year anniversary of the podcast, so I just wanted to thank you all so much for making this such an incredible experience. And I said it before, but the messages, the emails, reviews, and everything has just been overwhelming, and I'm so glad that I can share my love of this franchise with you all. The next episode is going to be very, very exciting, so please come back and tune in. You are not going to want to miss it. I'll see you then. Take care. Podcast of the Caribbean is in no way affiliated with Disney. If you want to send me an email or a question, you can send it over to podcastofthecaribbean@gmail.com. You can also follow this podcast on Instagram and Threads at Podcast of the Caribbean and over on Twitter/X at PodcastPOTC. I post fun content and trivia over there, so make sure to check those platforms out. And you can also buy merchandise for this podcast over on TeePublic. Be sure to keep a weather eye on the horizon, and always remember, dead men tell no tales.